And now, here's the host of American Investigator Special Edition, Paul Weyrich.
Good evening and welcome to American Investigator Special Edition, the only program that allows you, the viewer, to question the reporters who did the story live. I am your host, Paul Weyrich, and our first story tonight looks into Paula Jones' sexual harassment lawsuit against President Clinton. Behind the seamy headlines of the case, our American Investigator team discovered a huge money trail. Here to tell us where the trail leads is investigative reporter Scott Wheeler. Scott?
Thanks, Paul. Fighting the Paula Jones lawsuit has racked up some serious legal bills for the president. But is Bill Clinton writing the checks? The answer may surprise you.
Then he tried a second time. He started to get closer to me. He leaned up against a chair. He started to put his hands and slide up my legs.
On the surface, the Paula Jones case seems very simple. She claims that Bill Clinton sexually harassed her in a Little Rock hotel room in 1991.
It was just humiliating.
A story that is tailor-made for tabloid headlines. It features sex, politics, accusations, denials, and the President of the United States.
And there is no credible charge.
But while some in the media have been attracted by the sex appeal, American Investigator was interested in the President's court appeals and who was paying for them. We found two large insurance companies, State Farm Mutual and the Chubb Group, picking up the legal defense tab for the President, who they say is just a policyholder. Corporate spokesman Mary Boone assures other State Farm policyholders that if they were ever in a predicament similar to Clinton's, like a good neighbor, State Farm would be there for them too.
So this policyholder happens to be the President of the United States. He could be an astronaut, he could be a bum, we would still provide a defense.
For 3 years, Clinton's high-priced Washington attorney Robert Bennett has fought to keep the suit from going to court, arguing that Clinton was protected from civil lawsuits while president. But a 1997 Supreme Court decision changed all that, ruling that President Clinton could in fact be sued like anyone else. Meanwhile, amidst all the publicity, most people hadn't noticed that Chubb and State Farm had poured nearly $2 million of policyholder money into the president's legal defense. And the meter is still running.
The average citizen doesn't have that clout via spin, media influence, sheer weight of celebrity status, what have you, etc., to gain an edge from a corporate entity like a State Farm Insurance Company.
But one average policyholder had noticed State Farm's payments to Clinton, Tom Flacco of Philadelphia. Even so, he wasn't quite prepared for the notice he recently received from State Farm.
I received this note right here, this rate increase, that says costs of liability claims have continued to rise in recent years, and these higher claim costs are expected to continue. Well, obviously, knowing what I know.
Mr. Flacco immediately dusted off his own umbrella policy, on which he had never made a claim, to see exactly what State Farm policies do cover.
Then I began to start to figure, what could I do? Is there something I could do as an average citizen?
Although he didn't know what to look for, Mr. Flacco was certain of one thing: insurance won't cover something done on purpose, like sexual harassment. As his curiosity turned to concern, Mr. Flacco contacted Judicial Watch, a Washington-based advocacy group. Chairman Larry Klayman took an interest and ultimately agreed to represent Mr. Flacco in a lawsuit against State Farm on behalf of all their policyholders.
And what the case alleges is that there is not coverage under the policy of insurance that the President took out to cover alleged acts like this, because what he's being sued for, which is a type of sexual harassment claim guised as a violation of constitutional rights and libel, is not covered. It's an intentional act, and they're not covered under a policy of insurance.
And there's difference.
American Investigator sought confirmation of Mr. Klayman's allegations. Richard Giller is a Los Angeles attorney who specializes in insurance coverages.
If it had been given to me to make a determination on coverage, I would have absolutely denied it. Flat out said there is no coverage under the State Farm policy, regardless of the defamation claim, because the defamation claim is not separable or severable from the sexual harassment claim.
State Farm has acknowledged that Clinton didn't even notify them of his claim until over a year had passed since the suit had commenced. A prominent government insurance commissioner told American Investigator filing that late would automatically invalidate such a claim. Another mystery, why would State Farm compensate Clinton's personal lawyer, who charges nearly $500 per hour, well in excess of the $135 an hour industry standard?
In my view, they're not contractually or legally obligated to pay a dime of President Clinton's defense in this case, let alone $750,000 in defense so far.
When we asked corporate spokesman Mary Boone to explain State Farm's position, she insisted that Clinton's claim had been handled in a routine manner.
He's being treated just like we would treat any other policyholder.
American Investigator has uncovered evidence to the contrary. Since State Farm claims that Clinton's insurance policy was issued in Arkansas, the amount paid out should have been reflected in the incurred losses report with the Arkansas Insurance Commission. A confidential source inside the commission revealed to American Investigator that there is no evidence of the payments to Clinton in their annual reports to the commissioner's office. You can see why Mr. Flacco and many other policyholders would be disgruntled. The president is making his own terms. Who gets to represent him? State Farm doesn't do that for any other policyholder.
Certainly policyholders do have input and are involved in their cases.
Are you saying that they would get to pick their own counsel?
Every
regardless of the
case
costs?
is based on its own merits, its own circumstances, what's required in the particular case.
In any other case,
I can't cite any case histories if that's what you're looking for.
why would State Farm retroactively pay for the president's legal defense when 13 months had passed?
Once he found out that his policies would help provide a defense, he contacted both of his insurance companies.
The president is a lawyer, and he has a $495 an hour lawyer representing him, and neither one of them thought to consult with their liability umbrella
I don't know
insurance?
what sort of thinking went on. I'm not inside anybody's mind.
And then
so.
once they did just make this startling revelation, State Farm kicks in for what they call a pre-tender. They pay for his legal expenses.
The case was
retroactively.
reviewed. It was reviewed by our on-staff counsel, outside counsel, our claims handlers, and it was determined that we needed to make these payments.
You've spent over $1 million to delay a case from going to court that would have settled for $700,000? Is that a wise use of policyholder money?
Certainly our attorneys and the president's attorneys have been talking about this issue, and I'm not privy to the details of those conversations. I don't know.
So far, you haven't spent a penny on the defamation defense. It's all gone to get the case delayed from being heard in court. Not one dime of it has gone to the actual defense against defamation or to settle the case.
They're necessary legal steps that get the defense charges to trial. And we are convinced, to this point, we're convinced, remain convinced, that if the defamation charges ever get to a trial judge, they'll be dismissed.
If that's the case, why would you spend $1 million to keep it from going to a trial judge?
Policyholder has the right to a defense.
But what about other policyholders?
I don't like being lied to. When somebody deliberately and outright lies, that's when they got trouble with me.
The Smith family in Fontenelle, Iowa has a slightly different impression of State Farm. Last January, an electrical fire sent their Kraft wholesale shop up in smoke, and State Farm was notified within hours, not months. So did State Farm then blaze a trail to their door?
It just seems that every time they tell us how they want something done or what they want done, and we do it that way, they come back and they want it presented to them in a different manner. For instance, I had to go through the bids that we've gotten to figure out how many 2x4s there were in that building.
Mrs. Pottabaum estimates that she and her sister have put 3,600 man-hours into the claims effort so far. State Farm recently contacted her as to the status of her efforts.
I was informed last week that we were only a third of the way there, so we still have countless hours ahead of us.
This is a nightmare for my family. We spend hours and hours and hours going through, trying to catalog, remember the best we can what was in this room, writing everything down. It goes on and on and on and on. It's like, is this thing ever going to end?
It's going to be difficult for State Farm to justify this sort of treatment.
I don't know that State Farm has to justify anything. That
State Farm is a mutual company, right?
Yes.
A mutual company, which means it's essentially owned by the policyholders.
Exactly.
Don't they have a say in this matter?
Every policyholder has a stake in this company. And we do our best to be fair to every single policy. I've spoken to probably 300 policyholders who've heard from the right-wing press some misinformation about this case. And when I explain to them the facts, they're relieved to know that if they were to have a claim, the insurance company would be there for them as well.
But don't try to tell that to Carol Johnson of Mason City, Iowa.
I reminded her I probably carry the same fire insurance that the president carries, and they didn't cover my fire, so
She had a State Farm policy when her house burned down in December of 1995. But unlike President Clinton, Mrs. Johnson was left out in the cold.
And they were supposed to be paying my rent. Consequently, they weren't paying my rent. So we moved into a house that didn't even have a furnace in the dead of winter in the state of Iowa, which is not.
While State Farm paid off like a slot machine for President Clinton and his $495 an hour lawyer, they told Mrs. Johnson that $35 for a pair of shoes was just too much.
The only thing they didn't question was forks, knives, and teaspoons until it came to the real silver. Then they questioned that.
Carol Johnson is a policyholder, not an insurance expert. But every insurance expert we consulted agreed that President Clinton is receiving special treatment from State Farm. And what about the silent partner, the Chubb Group? Chubb has matched State Farm's contributions to the president's legal defense dollar for dollar. In previous press reports, Chubb has refused comment on the Clinton case. And Chubb spokesman Donna Louver made no exceptions for American Investigator.
It's our corporate policy not to discuss ongoing cases with the media.
Chubb's unwillingness to discuss the more than $1.2 million they've contributed to the president's legal defense has raised a few eyebrows. Since Chubb policies specifically exclude coverage for sexual harassment lawsuits, there's widespread suspicion that Chubb has given the president a gift. But what has Chubb gotten in return for their money? An overnight in the Lincoln bedroom, perhaps? Sources tell American Investigator that it's far more serious than that. The insurance industry as a whole faces fierce competition from the banking industry, because when people invest in insurance annuities, they put less money in the bank. Insurance annuities are tax deferred, but if the company backing them goes under, there's no guarantee that the money will be there when the purchaser retires.
Because if an individual wants to put his money away, so that money is there when he retires, you've got to be sure the money's going to be there when he retires. When an insurance company...
As far as retirement savings are concerned, Dennis Gingold is the man who helped invent the better mousetrap, the tax-deferred CD.
So we decided if we could create a product that qualifies as a deposit under the National Bank Act and qualifies as an annuity under the Internal Revenue Code for annuities issued by other than insurance companies. We've created a product that's important for banks on a profit side and important for the consumer because the retirement money is going to be there.
After Mr. Gingold's tax-deferred CD had been certified at all levels of government, he was ready to market it through banks around the country. But insurance industry lobbyists had other plans.
I was specifically told that they think this is a brilliant product. It is a wonderful product, and that's precisely why they will not permit this product ever to be offered, and they will do everything they could do to crush us.
Sources tell American Investigator that through secret meetings with the IRS and fundraising activities for the White House, the insurance industry lobbyists convinced the Treasury Department to revoke the tax-exempt status, essentially killing the whole concept of tax-deferred CDs. Many have been suspicious of the Treasury Department's timing. Did the president intervene on behalf of the insurance industry in exchange for State Farm and Chubb's bailout of his legal defense? At the time, the insurance industry was suspected of collusion. The Department of Justice quickly initiated an antitrust investigation headed up by Ann Bingaman, wife of New Mexico Senator Jeff Bingaman. Larry Clayman recalls the peculiar outcome.
And this investigation mysteriously ended one day. And a banking official called the head of the antitrust division, Ann Bingaman, and said, "Why did this investigation end?" And the response was, "Those expletive deleteds in the White House told me I couldn't continue with my investigation." The insurance industry didn't want this competition, and at the time that it was pumping money into the Clinton administration and meeting at secret coffees in the White House, it was seeking to exclude the banking sector from competing with it. That's why we believe, and it's why it's our opinion, that these payments were all too convenient during the time that the president needed cash to pay his legal bills.
The Paula Jones case initially looked like a tabloid disaster for Bill Clinton, but the resourceful president apparently found shelter in the storm. To cover his soaring legal bills, it appears he blocked what the insurance industry saw as the greatest threat to their $60 billion a year annuity business. The bottom line, if you're a State Farm or a Chubb policyholder, you'll be paying higher premiums each and every month. If you're an average citizen looking forward to a secure retirement with tax-deferred CDs, you're out of luck. Either way, whatever happened in that Arkansas hotel room in 1991, you're paying for it.